Hey now peeps, today we're going to take a look at AWACON, which is an acronym that stands for Old World and Code of 9. This is from the designer Fire, who, as you may remember, is the designer of Tragedy Looper, which is one of the coolest, most innovative games I've played in the last year, and it recently had a North American release. Now, this version of the game is still the international edition that is not really widely available yet. It's going to premiere at Essen Spiel this year, I believe. And this is actually quite different than Tragedy Looper. You may remember that Tragedy Looper was a sort of a one versus all deduction game. And there is a lot of deduction in this game, but the base mechanic here is actually worker placement. And the story is really unique and very haunting. It takes place in the future where the world is dead, essentially. Maybe not the world itself, but humans are all dead. There's been some sort of widespread tragedy that has left every human being gone. And all that's left are these automatons, these androids that look like humans, and they wake up after 100 years of slumber to find that all of their masters are gone. But they still are compelled to fulfill their programming, like the will that's left behind in them, and to actually be the one who fulfills the last will of the humans of the Earth. So this is a competitive game, and I almost don't want to say too much until I go through the overview, but essentially, each of you, as the players, are trying to fulfill your own directives while trying to figure out what everyone else's directives are to make sure that they don't conflict. I know it sounds weird. Let's go through the overview. This is a very unique game, and then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Okay, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of AWACON, also called Old World and Code of 9. This is a competitive game for 3 or 4 players exactly, and the theme of the game is that you're all like sort of android automatons who've woken up after 100 years to find out that the human race is dead. All of your creators are dead, but you still want to fulfill their wishes, their last will. So you're moving around these ruins, trying to pick up different items and meet the requirements of your programming. However, you know some parts of what your programming are, but you don't know what the other characters are trying to do. Mechanically speaking, this is a worker placement game. And aside from all that, this is a worker placement game, and you're trying to get the most points by the end of the game. Now, a typical game of AWACON is going to go 5 rounds, but it is possible for the game to go only 4 rounds. It can vary a little bit there, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But at the beginning of the game, this is the typical setup of the board. You're going to populate it with all of these different items that are out here. So you have books, and then you have the white and black legacies, which just look like these weird little tokens here. Everything is tokens. Then you have coins, and you have statues, and all the different spaces on the board represent your different worker placement spaces. Although, one interesting thing here is that certain spaces are blocked off until you get to a certain round. So up here at the top, you have 2 spaces that are only in round 1. Then all these spaces here are on round 1 or for the rest of the game. Then when you get to round 2, that top space is blocked off. Then you have these 2 new spaces here for round 2. Round 3 opens up these 4 spaces. Round 4 opens up this space here. It's actually 2 people can go there. I'll explain that again. And then round 5, this space opens. But you may have noticed that there's also cards along the edges of the board. These are extra spaces for people to go on. And the reason why they're cards is that, well, first off, some of them are expert level only. And I do just recommend doing expert level because it's not a big deal. Also, some of the cards are dependent on number of players, either 3 or 4 players, in which case you flip it over to the applicable side. This is a setup for 3 players. Every player is going to get their own little play mat that is going to look like this. And I'll point out some of the interesting things, or the necessary things on here. One is your will gauge. So you'll have a little will token, which you'll get. And at the beginning of the game, the first player doesn't get any extra will, but the second and third player, in the starting order, the second and third player get 1 starting will, and then the last player, I think, gets 2 starting will. So you can constantly fluctuate in will by going to different spaces. And this is a currency that you're going to use to activate more powerful spaces. That's really the only thing that will is used for. You have little action tokens, which sort of represent your worker. So they'll populate here until you've used them. Once you've used them and put them out on the board, you'll take them off of your mat. This is a place for the start player token, which is right here. And then this is just where you put all the different items that you've gathered. It's your in the bag spot. But you're probably wondering, what the heck is this? These are where your memory cards go, the Shoal and the Abyss. Memory cards are the stack of cards that look like this on the back that you're going to shuffle up and deal out to everyone. And again, there are expert cards and normal cards. I recommend just using all of them put together. Maybe not for your first game, but definitely from then on. So you'll shuffle all these out and deal 2 cards out to everyone. You get 1 mulligan if you don't like your cards, but only if you sacrifice one of your actions for the first turn. Now, these cards are going to change the victory conditions of the game and the point values of a lot of the cards that come out. This is sort of the crux of the game. This is the gimmick of the game, if you will, and what makes it different from other worker placement games. Every single one of those memory cards actually modifies how not just you, but everyone could potentially win or lose the game. Whether it's making certain items worth more points, less points, or just knocking people to get altogether out of the game if they don't meet certain requirements. And when you get your 2 cards and decide that you're going to keep them, you are going to put 1 card in the Shoal and 1 card in the Abyss. This is important because there are spaces out on the board that are going to let you look at other people's cards so you could try and divine what you need to do in order to win. It is much easier to look at the Shoal cards, the card that's in front. In fact, right in round 1, there are 2 spots that let you look at Shoal cards. And there's another spot in round 2 as well. So it's not that difficult to do. But to look at Abyss cards, you can't even do it until round 3, and there's only a few different spots. Actually, round 2 will let you do it as well, but it's very difficult to do, which I'm going to get to. So it's much more difficult to look at Abyss cards, so you may want to put the one that you want to keep hidden in your Abyss section, or maybe you want to bluff and put it up front with people thinking that you wouldn't dare put the most important one up front. That's a little bit of the trickery to this game. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few of these so I can give you an idea of what the heck I'm talking about. So this one here says all coins get +1 victory points at the end, whereas they're normally worth 0. Now, a lot of them are simple like this. So this one says that the Black Legacy token is going to get +3 victory points. I guess these are supposed to be pictures of the different androids. Despair here says all victory points from the statues are negative. This one says that all players with exactly 2 books lose 10 victory points. And you see they start to get more complicated. If there's 1 player with the least coins, he is out of the game. This one here, which has the amusing risque title, I don't want that shit get lost, says that if there is 1 player with the least items, he gains 8 victory points. But if there's 1 player with the most items, he loses 5 victory points. So they're getting crazier and crazier. Here, I hate all players with more than 5 items, more than 5 more items than the players with the least number of items are out of the game. This one, the Medal, gets -50 victory points. That is only used in the expert game. And if the code 7 Despair is invalid. And if code 26, A Fearful Truth, is in the game, the winner of this game is the player with the least victory points. These are the expert cards, by the way, obviously. A Fearful Truth, the Medal gets 5 victory points, but if during the game someone looks at this card, you show it to all the players. The Last Tune of Dancing Hearts. Both players who release the legacies gain 50 victory points each. But then you have The Last Will of Sunken Hearts. Both players who release the legacies are out of the game. So I'll get to what that actually means in a minute. So once you have decided what your cards are going to be, you've decided now to take a mulligan, then the game begins. In typical worker placement fashion, you're going to decide who goes first in the first round. Then you're going to take turns going around placing one of your tokens representing an action out on the board in the applicable space. Every worker action space, except for one of the basic ones, requires that only 1 person be there. And once it's taken, no one else can go there until the end of the round, when everything resets. Everyone takes back their action markers. So let's just go through what some of these spaces do. And I'm not going to lift up the entire board, I'm sorry, but well, you have all the items around here, and so a lot of these spaces are going to be just about taking the items. So for instance, if I were to put a token here in the round 1 space, I very simply take 3 coins. Also in round 1 only, I can get 3 coins by going up to this space. But remember, the coins are worth 0 victory points, so you would want to take them if you think that there's some sort of special condition in play that you know about. Some of them are a little more difficult. Anytime that you see, I know it's hard to see, but there's little tiny fire symbols in some of the spaces. That means that you have to spend a will in order to go there. So up here in round 1, I could spend a will, go to this space, and grab a book, which is worth 1 victory point on its own, but again, conditions may change. There's a space, like in any worker placement game, that lets you take the first player marker, and it also lets you put a item back onto the board. You have spaces that let you get will, including a space, the only space in the game where multiple people can go. Any number of players can put their action markers there over and over again in order to get one will. Then you have the places that let you look at the shoal cards. So this one here lets you spend a will, put an action marker there. You get to look at one other player's shoal card, and now you are protected from other players' attack actions and card-looking effects for the rest of the round. This one lets you look at a shoal card, and also you may give one item from the board out to another player. So if you know there's a certain condition in play that gives someone negative points for having an item, might be something to do. But if you do it too early, you might be tipping your hand. Let's see. Then we go into round 2. I'll get to the cards at the end because those are a little more complicated. But excuse me. In round 2, you can look at someone's shoal card in this space, but you can also either take a statue or 2 will. This space here lets you spend 3 will in order to grab one of the legacy tokens, which are kind of not only worth 3 points each on their own, which is the most of any of the normal items, but a lot of the cards revolve around them, and there's a special end game condition as well, which we'll get to in a second. Let's see. Interesting other spaces. This one lets you steal items from other players. This one finally lets you look at someone's Abyss card, but you have to spend 2 will in order to do it. And this one, for 4 will, you are able to take any item you want from any other player. Now, let's go to this space here, because this is pretty interesting. If there are 2 players that each have a legacy, and they go here and spend 2 will, there's 2 different spaces here. Once both players are in those spots, they release the legacies, and they're out of the game, and the game ends immediately. So this is a premature way in round 4 that you can end the game before going to round 5. Then in round 5, you have an interesting space here which lets you give any item from any one player to another player for 3 will, including yourself to another player. So let's look at some of these other extra spots around here. This card, only available in expert mode, is going to let you take the medal, which is worth 2 victory points on its own, but again, a lot of cards have to deal with the medal. And you can also gain 4 will as well, but you have to spend 1 will to do this. This is a very interesting card in that there has to be 2 players who each go here and spend a will. When the second player lands on that card with their action token and spends their will, those 2 players get to look at each other's Abyss cards. If no one else joins you on that card, you just get 2 will back instead at the end of the round. This card here for 3 will, let me just remind myself, you can give up to 2 of your items to any other player. So if you know that if you find out late in the game that items are going to be bad for you, certain items, you can dump them off on another player. And this is an interesting one in that if you play with the expert rules, there's actually going to be a 9th memory card that is going to be put off to the side. And if you end up not liking one of your memory cards at the end, you can actually spend 3 will, go here, and exchange that memory with one of your shoal, or with either your shoal or your Abyss memory. So, believe it or not, that's really the game. You're going around trying to take actions to increase your odds of winning the game, but trying to also figure out what everyone's conditions are given the memories that they have. The last little bit I'll tell you about is that there's a special way that you have to score the game. It's not just as simple as adding up your points at the end. You have to flip over all the cards and then do each of the different codes and orders in order, so in a certain order. So that means that points are going to be gained, points are going to be lost, depending on all the different special conditions. It can just get kind of crazy when you get to the final scoring. But at the end of all that, if you were able to not only meet your personal victory conditions, but adapt to the victory conditions that other players have imposed upon you, you are going to be the winner. That's Alwacon. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Now, the theme of Alwacon is really cool. I could make an argument that the theme is not really brought out that well by the gameplay itself, because the gameplay, and I'll talk about this more in a minute, is just standard worker placement, very simple worker placement. So you're not going to feel like you're this android, striving and searching to fulfill the will of your forebears. It's not going to really make you feel that way, although I will say that the idea of the memory cards and trying to deduce what those cards are amongst the other players, that aspect of it does tie very well to the theme. So it's cool that you have this nice story to sort of give you the impetus to proceed through the game and try to find out what these other people's memory cards are. Component-wise, much like with Tragedy Looper, it's not going to blow you away. I really like the art on the cards a lot. and I like the way the box looks, things like that. But as far as the actual like components that you play with, just little, very generic looking tokens to represent your workers, to represent yourselves, I guess, moving around the board. And the board itself looks kind of, the iconography looks a little cluttered and messy, so it's not fantastic. It gets the job done, certainly. Once you get used to how the board looks and how the cards look and all the icons and things like that, it's okay. I just wish it was a little bit nicer. It's kind of the game that's kind of screaming for a deluxe edition of it, but okay, not a huge deal. Let's talk about this gameplay. Now, like I said, this is just a very standard worker placement game as far as the turn-to-turn mechanics. In fact, it's probably much simpler than any worker placement game that I've ever played before. And there's some neat things going on as far as having parts of the board get unlocked as you go through the game. And this is a relatively short game, so there's not like, you don't need a ton of different action spaces. You're kind of racing through this game. And so having different parts lock and unlock as you go through it, having different cards in different spaces depending on the number of players that you put next to the board, those types of things are kind of neat. I haven't really seen that too much in other games, but it's nothing earth-shattering. The innovation and fun of this game comes from those memory cards and trying to find out what the victory conditions are. And I will say it right now, I love this game. This game is so cool, and it's all because of that. It adds so much to the game. It adds a level of tension and just I don't know how to describe it. You know that you have a strategy. You know what your cards are. You know what you're trying to do. And you're like, okay, not a huge deal. What cards could they possibly have? And I've got plenty of time to figure out what they have. But you really don't. This is still a worker placement game, and you're still competing for spaces with other people. And it gets, you can look at shoal cards fairly easily. But then again, if you take your precious actions to look at shoal cards right off the bat, you may be giving up points from some of the items on the board that you may need to get for the conditions that you already know. Your cards, and maybe you were able to look at someone else's, but how many are you going to look at before you start focusing on what you think is your path to victory? And then once the Abyss card spaces get unlocked by going through the different rounds, then everyone's rushing to get those to see what those hidden cards are. But of course, you could always bluff someone out and put the really nasty card in front and just kind of hope that not too many people bother to look at your shoal card. That's the interesting thing going on here, trying to deceive people and make it seem like you're not doing what that you think you may be doing. I don't know how to say it. That your goal is different than that other people might suspect that it is. There's a moment in every game of this I've played where at least one person at the table thinks they know everything. They just know. They're like, okay, I didn't look at that Abyss card over there, and I didn't look at his shoal card, but whatever. How bad could they possibly be? I'm just going to do my thing. These coins are worth extra points for me. These statues are worth extra points. And if I get a couple books, it's fine. It's fine. I got one of the, the release things, the white or the black one. And it's no problem whatsoever. Get to the 4th or 5th round, and you look over at someone. You say, all right, fine, I'm going to look at his Abyss card. And just devastates your gameplay. Just like, this happened to me at least once, where I just looked at the person after looking at their card, and they're just smiling at me. And I'm like, you bastard, what have you done? And the rest of my turn of what little gameplay is left is me trying to jettison items off my card because all of a sudden they're worth negative points, or having a certain amount of things is worth negative points, or I'm going to lose if I don't have enough items or if I have too many. That's what happens in this game. And there's a good portion of you right now who are saying to yourself, that sounds terrible. It's so chaotic, having no control and planning up and building only to have it torn down. But it just works in this game. I think it's because the game does not overstay its welcome. I told you before, it's a relatively short game. Once you have your feet under you and know what you're doing, this is a 45-minute game. And you're really racing through it, even with 4 players. And this is for 3 or 4. Obviously you can't play with 2. It really wouldn't make sense. But even with the max amount of players, you're really racing through this. And because of that, it maintains that tension, and it doesn't feel too frustrating when you have that no moment, because it's going to happen to somebody. That's just how it is. The very first time I played this game, there was someone who was like, okay, I know that you guys have a ton of points, but I'm pretty confident here. I think I'm going to at least get 3rd place. And it turned out it was one of the expert level cards that someone had that knocked him completely out of the game. You are never safe here, and I like that. I think that if it was a lot longer, it would be frustrating knowing that you spent all this time building up this engine and, like in a typical worker placement game like Lords of Waterdeep or whatever, or, Kalis or whatever, and, knowing that you spent all this time in building up only to have it taken away by someone's random card. But in this, because the gameplay is so simple and so fast, you just never have that feeling of frustration. At least I didn't. There's a couple people in my group that did have that frustration who are more hardcore Eurogamers who probably felt a little deceived by this game, by how the mechanics actually relate to the memory cards and how it can just totally throw off your whole game. But for most of the people I played with, including myself, it was just awesome. It's just such an awesome and unique element. And I'm telling you right now that this Bakafire guy, one of the most innovative designers I have seen in a while, even just based off of 2 games that he's released. And he has at least one more game I just haven't played, but he is someone to watch out for because I am eager to see what his next game is based off of this and Tragedy Looper. In fact, I'm throwing down the gauntlet right now. Bakafire, if you're watching this, I want to see a trader game from you because I want to see what you do with that mechanic. I think that could be astoundingly awesome. Keep it at deduction element with the trader thing and do some new twist on it. Love it. I love the theme. It doesn't come out through the gameplay that much. I like the artwork. I think the components could use an upgrade, but the game is not too long. It's a perfect length for what it is. I love the idea of the memory cards. Not knowing whether your items are going to be worth plus 50 points or negative 50 points, or that you're just going to be completely eliminated. Just such a cool concept. I really can't recommend this one enough, especially if you love worker placement games but want a twist on it, or you're just tired of the same kind of Euro games over and over again. This takes a little dash of Ameritrashy, the social game goodness, and throws it into a worker placement game, and I love the result. That's Awakon from the designer Bakafire, and I believe the company, sorry, I should get this right, I guess it's self-published for right now and from Japan brand, but you're probably going to be able to find this at Essen this year, and after that, hopefully it gets picked up by someone who can treat the game right. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.